Hello and welcome to this, the 9th class in this Longsword course. Now, we're getting onto the subject of more advanced training where the purpose is to push yourself to the point where you start making mistakes. And your equipment is here partly to help you absorb those mistakes. But a couple of really important things. Firstly, the most important bit of safety equipment is your common sense and your good training. The thing is, no matter how much equipment you're wearing, you can still get badly injured. Just think about how many knights in medieval battles in full plate armor still died. Your equipment helps, but it does not keep you safe. Second thing to bear in mind, there's a concept called risk homeostasis that you should become intimately familiar with. The thing is, the more you reduce the apparent risk, the more risks you are likely to take, which is why, for example, sitting in a nice safe car with lots of crash zones, crumple zones around you and anti-lock braking and all of that sort of stuff makes you just as likely to do something stupid and kill yourself. Because you feel safe, because of your equipment, you go faster, you take more risks, and so you are more likely to get hurt. In my opinion, the best safety device for a car would be a stainless steel spike sticking out of the steering wheel so that drivers were absolutely petrified of anything that was likely to make them come to a sudden stop. People would be driving at 10 miles an hour and nobody would die. So, your equipment is what will allow your partner to play harder and to actually aim their strikes at the proper target. So, the equipment you're wearing basically determines the acceptable target area. This is, of course, anti-historical, because historically, when you're trying to murder somebody with a sword, you avoid their defensive equipment. In our practice, we actually aim for the defensive equipment. So we aim to strike the mask, we do not aim to wiggle the point under the mask. So, I'll just take you through the equipment we have here so you can get an idea of what you should be wearing for different kinds of practice. Firstly, obviously the sword. And as I've said before, it should have a rubber point on the end. This is always true. And it should flex in the thrust. Now, there are lots of different kinds of swords you can get. This one is by Arms and Armour, and it's my personally preferred training longsword. But there are plenty of other manufacturers, and so long as it's a little bit giving in the thrust, but remains rigid here, so when you're making your parries, the blade doesn't start to wobble, right? You have a reasonably safe sword. However, of course, because the blade flexes, you will tend to thrust harder, so the actual impact may well be pretty much the same. So, the equipment does not keep you safe. Now, here are a couple of masks. This is my Terry Tyndall mask, which has a suspension harness in it, and it is, in my opinion, the absolute best thing you can get for training with a longsword. I'll provide links where you can get this stuff in the notes. However, these are quite difficult to get hold of, and they are quite expensive. But you know, I value my head, so I bought one straight away. Most people these days are using a fencing mask with, ideally, sometimes without, this sort of padded back of the head protection, which is a good idea if there are going to be any strikes coming towards the back of your head. And here's the thing, as you up the intensity level, chaos will be generated, and you cannot guarantee that you won't be turning your back on your opponent at some point, and you cannot guarantee that they will not, in the heat of the moment, belt you in the back of the head. So this is a pretty good idea. So, a decent quality mask. This is your face, this is your eyes, this is your head. Do not economize on the safety of your most important bit. Okay. Now, on the subject of protecting your hands, in competition circles, this sort of thing is apparently preferred. It is mostly plastic, and frankly, I can't stand them. I think they're horrible. I don't like the feel of them. I don't like the way you can't really manipulate the sword properly holding them. I don't think they give particularly good protection, and I have just never liked them. I much prefer these. I have a pair of these which I've been using now for, what, a dozen years or so, and I've never had a finger broken in them. However, you should bear in mind that every gauntlet of every kind has some sort of trade-off between the amount of protection you get and the weight of it and the amount of mobility that you get. So what I do with these is I take a proper fencing glove that fits like a glove, and I glue it in and stitch it in so you get the feeling of a fencing glove. And in my pair of these, I can pretty much play the piano. If I could play the piano at all, I could play the piano in these gloves. But still, when you get a sword across the fingers, it might hurt, but it will protect you considerably. On the subject of mass, the mass is part of the protection, because what any kind of impact protection does, in part at least, it spreads the impact out over a larger area, but also the mass of the protection itself absorbs the blow. So the energy, the more weight there is, the more the energy is dissipated through it, so the less of that force comes through into you. So a little bit of weight is probably a good idea. These are not too heavy. These are noticeably lighter, but that's maybe one of the reasons why most of the really nasty hand injuries I've come across in not my students and not under my supervision over the last dozen years or so have happened when people have been wearing things like this. So, gauntlets, good pair of nicely fitting steel gauntlets, very good idea. If you must, the thing is, tournaments and tournament organisers have every right to determine the equipment that is legal within that tournament. And most tournaments these days do not allow steel gauntlets. I have never understood why, but that's just a fact. And if you want to take part in tournaments, you have to respect their rules. So you might need to get a pair of each. Now, for ladies, obviously, a little extra protection in the breast department is a good idea. And you can actually get similar things for gents as well. But while we're on the subject of chest protection, your two basic options are a fencing jacket with some kind of plastron over the top. This is, again, my preferred solution. Or a padded jacket. The reason I don't like the padded jacket so much is the padding is much more flexible than the plastron. So getting whacked in the ribs in a padded jacket can really, really hurt. Getting whacked in the ribs with this, you'll notice you've been hit, but it doesn't do you any harm. So I find this a better solution to this, but these are very popular because it's a kind of all-in-one solution, and again, they're tournament legal, and they're an awful lot better than nothing. Now, throat protection, a gorget, very good idea. This one is Zoe's, and it's made of steel, and you're not likely to get a point coming through there anytime soon. Zoe also wears a pad, a kind of linen pad underneath it, which helps absorb some of the impact, so strikes to the throat don't hurt so much. In a perfect world, I would prefer a gorget to have a lip around it so that a point that's coming in can't slide up and catch under the chin. So a rolled lip is ideal in my opinion. It is a good idea to have elbow pads, and these also extend down the forearm a little way, which if people are striking over your arms is probably helpful. And if you're going to be doing styles which emphasize strikes to the legs, such as, for example, the bolognese, you are going to want something for your partner to hit. Okay, so shin pads, and in any case, knee pads are a good idea. I have been cracked on the kneecap once with a sword, and it's not an experience I would like to repeat. And this, last but not least, these, my very sexy underwear. This provides some sort of padding for the thigh. So again, if you're getting cracked with a sword on the thigh, having one of those, wearing one of those underneath your trousers, probably a good idea. It absorbs some of the impact. So the amount of equipment that you wear will depend on what sort of hits you want to take. Okay? So at a minimum, protect your face and head and your throat and your delicate bits. And of course, gentlemen, I didn't get round to showing you a plastic cup because frankly that should be obvious. We've shown you at least one kick to the nuts in this course, so it's reasonable to assume that anyone who is kitted up for free play is properly protected and against all legal strikes. So make sure that whatever free play rules you fight under, take into account the equipment that you have and are wearing. So you might agree that seeing as neither of you are wearing groin protection, you will not whack each other in the nuts. That's reasonable. But to be honest, I would always tend to kit up one layer past where the rules stop. This is a good general advice. So you don't need to get all of this at once, and you don't need to wear all of this all the time, but it's a really good idea to start accumulating the necessary bits and then seeing what that allows you to do. So for example, if you've got decent gauntlets, you can practice keeping your hands safe because your partner can strike at your hands because you're wearing the gauntlets. So, in summary, this is the sort of equipment that you're probably going to want to be getting, but just please remember that it's not your equipment that keeps you safe. Your equipment exposes you to more risk because your partner will assume your equipment will keep you safe and they will hit you. So, it is good common sense and good defensive technique that keeps you safe. It is not good equipment that keeps you safe. Okay? So, bear this in mind and get the equipment that you need for the things that we're about to do. I will see you on the next class. Cheerio.